This time I'd like to call the March 8th, 2018 public works session to order. And at this time, if you will please stand for a moment of silence, which will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Mrs. Williams. Amen. Ms. Williams.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. At this time, Ms. Williams will read our mission statement.
The mission of the Portsmouth Public School Division is to engage all students in learning that will foster academic excellence and responsible citizenship.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. At this time, Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Miss Allen.
Present.
Jackson. Reverend Fleming.
Present.
Mrs. Hines.
Present.
Mr. Lamb.
Present.
Reverend Patillo.
Present.
Dr. Whitaker. Mrs. Williams.
Present.
Mr. Parent.
Present.
7 members present, 2 members absent.
Thank you. At this time, we will have the approval of the agenda. You have had a copy of the agenda. I hope that you've had time to review the agenda. What is the board's pleasure?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion's been made and second. Any discussion? Yes, Ms. Hines.
Is there any way that we can add budget discussion on here? Since we're voting on it in 2 weeks, is there any way that we can add a spot for just some budget discussion?
No, this be open.
You want to do, you want to do it right after the 3.12
Yeah.
Communication Annual Report Update?
That's fine.
All right, we'll make 3.13 budget,
Thank you, Chair.
and then we'll make 3.14 discussion agenda review, and then 3.15 will be board members' report, and 3.16 will be subcommittee. Okay? Any other additions?
Move for approval with additions.
Okay.
Second.
Motion's been made. Second. Madam Clerk, roll call vote.
Miss Allen.
Yes.
Reverend Fleming.
Yes.
Mrs. Hines.
Yes.
Mr. Lamb.
Yes.
Reverend Patillo.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Mr. Parent.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Thank you. At this time, I'm going to ask Mrs. Williams if she will call us into closed session, please.
I move that the board enter to a closed meeting under provisions of Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia for the following purposes. 1, consideration of a request for religious exemption from school attendance as permitted under subsection 8.2. 2, consideration of a student readmission as permitted under subsection 8.2. 3, consideration of personnel matters including the assignment, performance, and resignation of specific school employees as permitted under subsection 8.1. And 4, consultation with legal counsel concerning a legal matter requiring the advice by such counsel as permitted under subsection 8.7.
You've heard the motion read.
Second.
Motion's been second. Any discussion? Hear no discussion. Board, Madam Clerk, roll call vote.
Miss Allen.
Yes.
Reverend Fleming.
Yes.
Mrs. Hines.
Yes.
Mr. Lamb.
Yes.
Reverend Patillo.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Mr. Parent.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Okay. We are now in closed session.
Vote for the young man, so we can do that. If he's here.
I'm sure.
The motion to come out. Mrs. Williams?
It's a second, Kate.
Yeah.
Did you make the motion?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Oh, I read the motion and
Come
somebody
out.
who
Yeah,
seconded.
it was second.
Give a second. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. All right, the next item on the agenda is, board is consideration of a religious exemption case number 2017-18/04. What is the board's pleasure?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion's been made and second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing no discussion. Madam Clerk, roll call vote, please.
Miss Allen?
Yes.
Miss Atkinson?
Yes.
Reverend Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Hines?
Yes.
Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
Reverend Patillo?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Parent?
Yes.
It's unanimous.
The next item on the agenda is consideration of a readmission, case number 2017-18/39, for GED. What is the board's pleasure?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion's been made and second. Further discussion? Madam Clerk?
Miss Allen?
Yes.
Miss Atkinson?
Yes.
Reverend Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Hines?
Yes.
Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
Reverend Patillo?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Parent?
Yes.
It's unanimous.
The next item on the agenda is consideration of science course offerings 2018-2019. Gracie, Dr. Lynn?
Okay. In your packets, you will find information regarding 2 additional science courses that we wish to offer for the 2018-2019 school year. And these courses will increase student access to foundational and advanced placement or college level courses. We're asking for your approval on Environmental Science 1. Environmental Science, which is 1 unit that will be offered to 9th graders. It does not have a prerequisite. And then Advanced Placement Environmental Science will be 2 units, and it will be offered to 11th and 12th graders. And there are some prerequisites listed there as in Algebra 2, Earth Science Honors, and Biology Honors.
Okay. One of the questions that Mr. Robertson brought up at one of the meetings is that what he was hearing from the students was that we needed to have more AP course offerings. At this point, how many AP classes courses? I know that you can send it to me, but because if the students are asking for it, then that means that we're not offering enough. And I was glad to see this, so
Right.
I just wanted to know how many AP classes do we offer, because that would be, I'd like to know that.
I can get that information for you.
Ms. Hines?
Chair, thank you for bringing that up, because I would like to add to that, not just the number, but at what high school is offered what. Because I know AP is dependent upon your staffing and whether or not you have the staff to teach those courses.
That's correct.
But also too with the environmental science, when it talks about human impact on the environment and the living environment, I would also wonder if offering human geography or geography to ninth graders as well would be a good tie-in with that to do some cross-curricular activities. And I know that's not necessarily a course that we have always offered, but I think if we're going to bring in environmental science, why not maybe open up that offering so that we can do some cross-curricular and some real-world connection with that as well. So,
Ms. Hines, I'd spoken to Will Hicks about the possibility of AP Human Geography, and I'd love to do it. I'd love if we had a full buffet of AP courses. The reservation with AP Human Geography in a lot of places is that kids are expected to take the geography SOL at the end of it, and the courses don't necessarily jive. Because we're getting away from a lot of the social science SOLs, it might open the door
Right.
for us to bring that in
Okay.
and have full implementation of that.
okay.
All right.
Maybe we can talk about that at retreat. Okay.
What is the board's pleasure?
Move for approval.
Motion's been made and second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none. Madam Clerk, roll call vote, please.
Miss Allen?
Yes.
Miss Atkinson?
Yes.
Reverend Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Hines?
Yes.
Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
Reverend Patillo?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Parent?
Yes.
It's unanimous.
One more question, Chair.
Yes.
Is this going to be offered at all 3 high schools, or is this specific to a high school?
It'll be offered at all 3 high schools.
Okay. Thank you.
Next item is consideration of the school board annual summer retreat dates, August the 3rd through the 4th, 2018.
Move for approval.
Second.
Second.
Great. I thought you were going to have some more dates. We just kind of
No, but
threw it
that-
out and see what you were going to say. Thank you. All right. Motion's been made and second that we have our retreat August 3rd through the 4th. Madam Clerk, before you do roll call, have we confirmed it's going to be at TCC?
Yes.
Great. All right. It's going to be at TCC. All right. Madam Clerk, roll call vote, please.
Miss Allen,
Yes.
Ms. Atkinson,
Yes.
Reverend Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Hines,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Reverend Patillo,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Parent.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Chair, are we adhering to the same times?
TCC.
Like 5 o'clock on Friday to the evening and then all day Saturday?
We'll work it out.
Okay.
We'll get that to you.
I know the dates are the
I
big
just wanted to
thing.
get the dates in
Right.
so that you get it on your calendar, but we'll work that out. Because I will be asking you pretty soon for topics for us to discuss.
Okay.
Okay? The next item is consideration of an adjustment to the 2017-18 pay plan. Dr. Bracy.
Yes. Mr. Ziegler, will you share?
Yes, sir. Good evening, board members. Administration is coming before you tonight with a request to make an adjustment to the 2017-2018 pay plan, specifically as it has to do with substitute teachers. To give you a little bit of background on this, so far this year, through the end of February, we have had over 10,000 teacher absences. This is an average of 1,600, just under 1,700 absences per month. Our current sub-pay rate is $85 per day, which puts us in the lower 50% of school divisions in Hampton Roads. Our average fill rate, which means the number of classes that get filled on any given day, is about 78%. Our highest month of fill rate was September, which was at 90%, and our lowest fill rate was February, which is 69%. When classes are unfilled, that means other teachers in the building have to either double up on classes, or we pull, at the board's direction, we don't pull the encore teachers, but teacher assistants may help to cover, assistant principals may help to cover. It makes a school day very difficult when we don't have enough substitutes to go around. Our average number of unfilled classes in any given month is 385. If the board votes to increase sub-pay, that will enable PPS to rank among the highest in the daily substitute rate in the Hampton Roads area. Now, prior to asking for this pay increase, HR has tried several no-cost or low-cost options to boost substitute fill rates. The first thing that we instituted this year is we have assigned an HR associate who comes in early, starts her day at 7 a.m., and from 7 a.m. till 10 a.m., she calls manually substitutes. Our system for filling substitute teacher vacancies and teacher absences is an automated system by and large that either calls out via computer to substitutes, but more often those substitute teachers who work regularly log on to the system and pick those jobs for which they would like to fill. So there are enough jobs that a substitute could work every day of the week if he or she so choose. That effort of the HR associate was not very successful. At the most, she would get one sub that would fill a class, and that would be late in the day because I would have her call up until 10 o'clock. More often than not, what would happen is that the substitutes who are on the list, either as a requirement for a benefit or a requirement for unemployment, would simply block our number. So we would try calling from different numbers, and they would block those numbers, and eventually they would remove themselves from the sub list. The other thing we tried in November and December, which are typically low fill months because of the holidays, we gave a $100 bonus to subs who worked, I think it was 15 days in November, and again 15 days in December. We did have subs who qualified for that, and we saw November was our second highest fill rate at 81%. December, on the other hand, we got mixed results from that experiment because December was at 76% fill rate, which is kind of in the middle of our average. So what we'd like to do now, and this has been cleared by the Chief Financial Officer, we have the money in the budget to do this, and we think that raising the sub rate now will give us a good idea if it's a money issue or if it's a broader issue. If the low sub fill rates continue, then at some point we would probably be coming back to the board and asking for other solutions that would put more dedicated people just in our sub-management system, maybe even including an outside contractor to manage our substitutes. But we think this is a viable first step and will give us usable data to know how to proceed in the future. I'd like to do it now, starting April 1, because that still gives me April, May, and June, which are typically hard to fill months when the weather gets warm. It will give me usable data to know how to recommend we proceed in the future.
All right, what is the board's pleasure?
Question. You said we would be the highest among the area. So how do we stack with the others or compare to the other school divisions?
I didn't bring the ranking, but at $95 we would be ahead of Virginia Beach, we would be ahead of Chesapeake, we would be ahead of Norfolk, all the ones typically in this area. And a substitute, as part of the gig economy, people go where the money is.
Right.
So I give another example. If you drive for Uber, you most likely drive for Lyft as well, because whoever's flashing at that time, you're going to go where the money is. Substitutes do the same thing. So if there's a job available in Virginia Beach, which Virginia Beach's current rate is $89 a day, but that $4 a day over time, over the course of the month, adds up to an extra need being fulfilled.
Right.
And we think that $95 a day will bring people through the tunnel, and it'll keep the people who live in Portsmouth here in Portsmouth to fill our absences.
Thank you.
What is the board's pleasure? Do I have a motion?
Move for approval.
Motion's been made.
Second.
Now
Now we can discuss.
we can discuss. Mr. Lamb? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm in favor of this. You said that you're going to look at the data once it's done. This might seem like a simple question, but if we approve this and the new rates goes into play, how are we going to put that out there?
We have, through our system, we can notify subs directly. We do that often anyway. We can notify them to be called, and also they will get an email. And when they log onto the system, they'll see a message that supersedes a pop-up over their screen.
And how are we going to get that out there to track new people?
New people?
As well.
We have hiring data. We do a sub onboarding every month, so we'll be able to know. I mean, we'll advertise it that we're now among the highest paid.
Okay.
And we will put it in our outreach efforts through social media, through the school's social media. HR has social media dedicated to HR. We'll get the word out there.
Ms. Williams and then Ms. Atkinson.
I wanted to know how we were going to get the word out as well. Now, I had a question where substitute instructional assistants, step 1, do they make the same as what's their rate?
So their rate is based on the hourly rate. So in the pay plan, they're paid at the
at the step
IA
or
rate,
whatever.
Step 1.
Okay.
Per hour, yes.
Ms. Atkinson?
2 questions. To piggyback off Board Member Lamb's question, are we going to do a press release?
Yeah, where's Ms. Newsom? Yes, we'll do a press release.
Okay. And then with the substitute nurse pay, how do we compare with that?
I would have to check. I haven't been tracking substitute pay rates for nurses.
When I got on the board, one of my pet peeves, and I'm looking at Mr. Lamb because the bottom line is that you mentioned something that hit a nerve when you said using teaching assistants. You know, one of the things that drove a nail is that teaching assistants are not supposed to be used for substitutes. And I do realize principals have a difficult time when they've exhausted everything and you have no living body, then you use your teaching assistant. My big thing is if you're going to do that, you need to pay them the substitute rate.
That's right.
And I don't know what, I think it just got lost in the shuffle. But when you said that, that hit a nerve, because if you're going to ask an instructional assistant to go in and teach all day, then you need to pay them. You need to pay them at the substitute teacher pay.
Make that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ms. Williams?
Yeah, and they have been to the board complaining
Sure
about
they
that. Or they told us personally as well.
Right.
If you pull them to do that, then they need to be paid that
Yeah.
rate.
That's right.
And I don't think a lot of times the principals or whatever, they don't seem to get what we discuss or know about it. But you talked about this. That's a pet peeve that
Yeah.
we said, please don't do that anymore. That's really unfair labor practices to me. Because they shouldn't be doing that and not getting paid for what they do.
And then you mess up the rotation schedule, and the teacher doesn't get an assistant that day.
But I know that, like you say, you don't
Desperate
get a
times.
sub, you don't know what else to do, but I don't know, but they should pay them.
Well, we
I
can
agree.
make that happen as well.
Mr. Lamb?
And with bringing that up as well, also too with TAs, I think you also got to look at those classifications, because I know we've got special education TAs, and that's a whole different ball of rules and wax, if you will,
Kindergarten.
versus, just a regular TA as well.
The goal is to improve our sub-fill rate so that we don't have to pull TAs from their activity. And we have conveyed to the principals that this is not our preference, but we know in practice it's likely that it.
But it's got to get translated into in other words, if the TA is substituted that day, something needs to go into the,
For the pay.
well,
To
pay's got to
payroll.
go in. You got to fill out the paper.
Adjust that.
Absolutely.
We'll make that happen.
Yes.
It can be done with our existing systems.
Thank you, Chair. Question about long-term subs. I know that when we had extended snow time in January, there were a couple of long-term subs that reached out to say that long-term subs, they lose out on their pay for that day. When we're not in school because of whatever, long-term subs aren't getting paid. And so I think I would like to have a conversation about if we have somebody that is quote unquote under contract to be a long-term sub and we close school, can there be an exception made to buffer their pay like we do in other situations?
That's an interesting, yeah, bring that back.
That's a policy
So I know
question.
it's not a discussion pertinent to this, but it is a question worth raising.
Policy question.
Yeah.
You have to change the policy.
Do we have any other discussion? Hearing no more discussion, Madam Clerk?
Ms. Allen?
Yes.
Ms. Atkinson?
Yes.
Reverend Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Hines?
Yes.
Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
Reverend Patillo?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Parent?
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Thank you. Next item is consideration of employee grievance hearing officers. Dr. Bracy, or
Yeah. Mr. Ziegler, will you?
are we voting?
Okay, board members, the motion before you, or that I'm asking you to entertain this evening, is to appoint 4 individuals as potential hearing officers to hear employee grievance matters. The hearing officer would come into effect if a grievance gets to a step 3 or a part 3 grievance, which means it was not settled informally, or when a employee is recommended for termination. This procedure is required by state code and also school board policy GBMA. You see the list there in front of you. All of them are either sitting or retired HR and school administrators from the Hampton Roads area.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion's been made and second. Any discussion? No discussion. Madam Clerk, roll call vote, please.
Ms. Allen?
Yes.
Ms. Atkinson?
Yes.
Reverend Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Hines?
Yes.
Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
Reverend Patillo?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Parent?
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is 3.7-HR 2018-01. The recommendation is the consideration to revoke the teacher's license. The recommendation is affirmative, or you're going to vote either yes or no. Okay?
Do we need a motion?
Move for
Yes.
approval.
We need a motion. Motion's been made and second. Do we have any discussion for this item? All right, hearing no discussion, Madam Clerk.
Ms. Allen?
Yes.
Wait a minute.
It just means that the vote, an affirmative vote is to recommend dismissal.
That's correct.
Wait a minute, recommend dismissal?
It's
I mean revocation.
That's right, revocation, yes.
Sorry to interrupt, if I may. I believe we would be required to have two votes, case number HR
individual.
2018-01 and case number, I don't know if you were going that way.
I'm doing it individually.
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed that part. Thank
No,
you.
this is, I'm doing it
This is
individually.
01.
I'm doing 01. I'm doing 01.
Okay.
Okay.
Ms. Atkinson?
Yes.
Reverend Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Hines?
Yes.
Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
Reverend Patillo?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Parent?
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Thank you. The next item is 3.7, HR 2018-02.
Move for approval.
Motion's been made. Second.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing no discussion. Madam Clerk.
Ms. Allen?
Yes.
Ms. Atkinson?
Yes.
Reverend Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Hines?
Yes.
Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
Reverend Patillo?
I'm abstaining due to personal connection.
Okay.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Parent?
Yes.
7 yes votes, 1 abstention. It passes.
Okay. The next item is consideration of a special employee transaction report. No, I mean, sorry, the special education eligibility process. Dr. Tracy, I guess.
Yes. Dr. Bechtold and her staff is here to present this. As she's coming forward, this was a request from the board to see what the process was for determining eligibility. It came out of from the hearings, and you wanted to know what the procedure was. Yes. Dr. Bechtold, will you please introduce everyone to us?
Absolutely, I will. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again for the opportunity to be able to share with you and hopefully answer some of your questions about the process that we use to determine whether or not a child is eligible to receive special education services. With me tonight, I have one of our supervisors and our program specialist. Ms. Marcy Pronovost is our supervisor, and one of her responsibilities is to be in charge of the eligibility process, setting them up and making sure that they go smoothly and watching our timelines, etc. With us also tonight, even though it doesn't say that on that front screen, is Mrs. Lisa Gehring, and Lisa is a program specialist in our department. She does an awful lot of professional development with our teachers and our administrators, and her primary responsibilities are with our child find process, our early childhood students, and our out-of-district students that we have to look into. So with that being said, I'm going to let the two ladies share with you, and I think you have been given a handout. We are going to go through this as concisely as we can. We had planned to skip a few of the slides, but you do have them in the portfolio that we handed you, and if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them when we finish.
Dr. Gartzell. Thank you for having us here tonight. So again, in your folder, you have a copy of the PowerPoint, and we will go through just a portion of it, and you're welcome to review the rest of it on your own and contact us with any further questions that you have or clarification. In addition, we do have, Portsmouth Public School does have eligibility guidelines. It's a 71-page document. You have a 3-page excerpt from a few pages in there as well that we will be referencing. So the first thing that you need to know about special education is that it is the highest tier intervention. Special education should be your last ditch effort, if you will, in the intervention process. If we're looking at tiered interventions, you have classroom interventions that are available to all general education students. You have small group interventions for those needier students, and then you have individualized instruction and intervention for your neediest students. So when we look at special education eligibility or referral to special education, we're looking at our very neediest students, okay? So in our school division, in our schools, we have two types of meetings. We have school-based team meetings and special education team meetings. And so I want to briefly touch on the differences between those, and Lisa will jump in whenever she wants. School-based team meetings are for a general education purpose. They're requests for assistance. So they might be a child study meeting, they might be a behavior team meeting. They are to look at what kind of interventions we can do in the classroom before looking at special education. They might be looking at, increasing iReady time. If, every student is getting 45 minutes, do we need to increase that time? So some examples of that are if a parent indicates that their child is having difficulty reading, they're a little bit behind, what kinds of things can we do in the general education classroom for that? If a child is having behavior issues and the teacher isn't sure how to handle that, they might get a school-based team together that might include an administrator, a counselor, and try to see what else they can do in the classroom. The next side of this is the special education team meeting. We call it a SET. And this is when you get more folks involved, when you get your school psychologist involved, your school social workers involved, and this is when we suspect a disability. So this might be when a parent brings in an outside evaluation with a diagnosis, such as ADHD or bipolar disorder. It might be when a reading specialist says, we've tried a lot of interventions with this kid. I think this kid might have a learning disability. Or anytime somebody says, I want a special education evaluation with some knowledge behind that. Okay. All right, so we're not going to go through very much on here, but just know that a referral to special education can be oral or written, and it comes to the school, and the school administrator has timelines that they have to keep in mind. They should be convening a team within 10 days and deciding at that meeting if we want to try different interventions or if we want to refer for more evaluations to see if that child meets the criteria for special education eligibility. And keep that in mind, so once that referral is made, we have 65 days to come together to determine if this child is eligible or not.
So there's 3 prongs to special education. There's 3 requirements for special education eligibility. And I think a lot of times what we find in special education is that people may get confused sometimes because a parent has a diagnosis or somebody says that a child needs an IEP. So if you're diagnosed with ADHD or you're diagnosed with autism, just because you have those diagnoses does not mean that you automatically are eligible for special education. There's 2 other steps in that process that the eligibility team considers, and that's the adverse impact on educational performance and whether or not the child requires specially designed instruction in the classroom. And so we have a lot of other instruments that we're using to make that determination. So if a parent comes to us with a diagnosis of, say, ADHD, we even explain to the parent that your child clearly meets number 1, that your child has a disability, but now what we need to do is collect additional information to determine the effect of that disability on their educational performance and the overall need for specialized instruction.
And one of the big differences that we look at is, does this child just need accommodations like extra time or read aloud, or do they need specialized instruction to their weaknesses in order to access the general education curriculum? So there is a difference between specially designed instruction versus just accommodations.
Let me ask you a question. When you said accommodations, does that also include, in other words, if it's determined that the school has done everything they possibly can do, is homebound instruction listed as a legitimate accommodation?
Homebound instruction is not an accommodation, it's a setting. And so we can have homebound instruction either for a medical disability or we can have home-based instruction if it's an administrative placement. So it's really an educational setting, not an accommodation or instruction. We do provide general education instruction through homebound. We also do provide specialized instruction for our special ed students who are placed on homebound.
So if a parent comes to you and says, I mean, you've tried everything and it just doesn't work, and request homebound instruction, doesn't work that way.
Homebound instruction and special education
are 2 different things.
Are 2 different things, yes. They work together, but again, homebound is it's a placement, so it's due to medical disability or an administrative placement. Oftentimes we have special education students that are
But
placed
the
on.
child is special ed.
Oh, you're talking about a student.
I'm
who's
talking
already
about a
special
student who is special ed.
If it's a student who's special ed, then it has to go before the IEP team for placement, because only the team can determine whether or not they give homebound. That's not something we could administratively place, because within that meeting, they would also have to restructure the types of services that the student is receiving based upon their disability. So that's a placement question. That's not an eligibility question.
You've answered a question for me. Thank you.
And if you, Mr. Parent, if you would like to have, further discussion, I'm
No. I've asked it for a specific reason.
All right. So included in this packet, we also have some scenarios, and I won't go through them with you, but I would encourage you to take a look at them. We have two different scenarios that you can review. The first is a scenario of a student who did not qualify for special education, and we were looking at this student for a possible emotional disability. And what we would like to talk about is you all have students that come before you. Besides the second page of your, not the second page, the other handout that you have besides the PowerPoint are a few excerpts from our PPS eligibility guidelines. The first page on there, that's taken from page 16 from our guidelines, has all of the eligibility classifications under IDEA. And that is just a list of the classifications. If you turn the page, what we would like to talk to you about, and it's taken from page 70 of our guideline, page 27 from our guidelines, are the contrasting characteristics between an emotional disability and social maladjustment. So when we go to eligibility and we are considering a child for an emotional disability, we have to determine if it's a disability or if it's just from social maladjustment, and oftentimes it can be confusing. So we urge you to just kind of take a look at a few of these, and we're just going to highlight a few. It's a long list, but sometimes we'll pull this out at eligibility.
And the reason we chose to speak about social maladjustment versus emotional disability is because a lot of times as a school board, what you find is that the children who are coming through for discipline hearings are kids that usually have bipolar mood disorder, they have ADHD. So we wanted to talk a little bit specifically about when you see behaviors, this is kind of what the process we're going through in eligibility to make that determination between a disability versus social maladjustment.
So some of the differences, so if you look at the very top, it says school behavior. So an emotional disability, a student might be unable to comply with a teacher request. Where social maladjustment, they're unwilling to comply with a teacher request, or they reject help. Moving down a little bit, you might have, you'll see educational performance. A student with an emotional disability might have uneven achievement, and it's going to be impaired by anxiety or depression or their emotional moods. A student with social maladjustment, their achievement might be influenced by truancy or negative attitudes toward school or avoiding school. Moving down a little bit, perception of peers. An emotional disability, they might be perceived as bizarre or odd or be bullied. If they are socially maladjusted, they might appear as cool or charismatic. Coming down a little bit further, if we look at locus of disorder, a child with an emotional disability is going to have an affective disorder. Oftentimes they're going to internalize. A child with social maladjustment, they're going to externalize, and they will have a conduct. They might have a conduct disorder similar to oppositional defiance disorder. So, so we use this to determine when we come to eligibility if a child has a disability or if it's social maladjustment. Okay.
And sometimes you see kids who look more aggressive, who are acting out, externalizing. When you actually look at it closer, you may find that it's resulting from more of that emotional disability. So there's a lot of discussion about the reasoning behind the behaviors, how long the behaviors existed. That's another thing. If the child is having an emotional difficulty or facing depression or an adjustment disorder right now because their parents divorced or they lost a loved one, they're experiencing grief. But if they haven't experienced that for more than 6 months at a time, it's not 6 months or longer, it's not going to be diagnosed as a disability because it's something that we're seeing as a situational trauma. And that's something that we have to rule out before we say that a child has a disability. Because in special education, what we're trying to do is prevent putting children in special education, because then that stacks more odds against them in life. So our goal in the special education department is to get kids the help they need when they're regular working with teachers and training teachers and staff to work with kids in regular ed, provide the best services we can there to prevent them from becoming special ed. And that the kids that are actually eligible for special education services, that they're out in the regular ed environment getting the best resources that they can get as often as possible and getting the specialized instruction in that environment. Because we know that that's what's going to have the long-term success rate for kids to graduate.
And you keep using the term regular ed. You really are referring to inclusion.
To general education classrooms. So there's different ways that we can provide that, yes, in the general education classroom though, where the general education teacher is leading the instruction and either a special education teacher is coming in to provide consultative services, or we also have co-teaching classrooms where a special education teacher and a regular ed teacher are in together all day providing those.
Gotcha.
Just a general question from witnessing so many behaviors, especially in the elementary school level. For those that have emotional disabilities, do you feel that we are, as a special ed department, do you feel that you are properly staffed and have the resources needed to match these?
Yeah, and one of the
Love
issues,
to have more.
yeah, we very much rely on CSEP to serve our students with emotional needs. We do not have the resources within our school district to serve those students. So.
You get them.
So is there any way that possible, if it's okay with the chair and the board, that you could maybe provide what you feel like you're lacking as far as resources?
Yeah, and actually today we were given the opportunity to look at hiring an instructional specialist for the special education department to provide.
And I only ask because I have mentees that have certain classifications, and I know it's difficult for me to manage maybe 3 boys at one time and for a teacher to manage 10 or 12.
Exactly. You're absolutely correct. And we have provided our wish list, but we are fortunate enough right now to be searching. We did interview today to hire 2 specialists. And at least one of those people, but probably both of them, will spend a lot of their time on behavior intervention plans with the teachers. These are not people who are necessarily going to work with children. They can model, and they may very well do a lot of modeling for teachers, but these people would be able to go into the classroom where the teacher you're talking about is struggling with 3 or 4 out of 10 that are acting out all the time, and be able to give them some strategies that will work. We are always looking for training opportunities for our teachers who have the most challenged behavior children, and we send them. We are planning to send some in the very near future for some behavior analysis type training. But you're absolutely right. We do not have all the staff that we need, and one of the reasons that I collected the data to determine that we needed a specialist is based upon the number of students that Mr. Parent was just referring to that we have had to place on homebound status. And we have to place some of these students on homebound status because they don't qualify for any of our regional program opportunities, and yet they are a safety issue within the building.
Right.
So we do the temporary homebound situations and revisit it as often as we can in order to try to transition the children back into the schools.
So, and to your point also, one of the things that we've recognized from our data and working with our high needs schools, we need to do more training with our staff around working with this particular population of students, because the difficulties and the challenges that they bring to the classroom are so disruptive that the teachers often don't have the skill set, to address the population. And so that was another reason that we created these positions. But what we recognize is that we need specific behavior therapists for our students, because we have a population of students who come from very challenging situations and who bring sometimes medical and psychological deficits that exceed our capabilities. and they don't necessarily qualify for CSEP, but we have to be able to address them. We also recognize the need to do some cultural and sensitivity training with our staff so that they understand some of our children come with what they with what they have in their environment. So the language that they use doesn't necessarily mean that they're acting out. What it means is that this is what the language that they know to use. And so all of that training will be significant and hopefully helping us bring some sense of calm to some of our buildings where we're having a lot of emotional issues with our students just acting out, especially at the elementary schools, like you said.
And it won't always be the special educators that we would be working with.
Right.
Because as Ms. Gehring explained and Ms. Pronovost both, the majority of the students in Portsmouth Public Schools are in the general ed classrooms.
Yeah.
So it would be an opportunity to offer our gen ed teachers as well what to do, because you're not going to have 24/7 a special ed teacher nor an instructional assistant. So you're going to have some skills on how to handle the children whose behaviors are up there.
Mr. Lamb?
Yeah, question. I've always been fascinated with, we've got the 13 categories of, you know, what special needs, special education is. How do we, OHI, you know, it seems as though that is the catch-all, end-all. I mean, if a student is categorized as, say, ADD, even though that's not a specific category, they sometimes will get put under OHI or vice versa. How do, as a district, how do we, what parameters or definitions, if you will, besides federal, that we use to come to or reach that category of OHI?
Actually, Marcy and I are co-leading right now, and we're looking at our eligibility guidelines, and we're revising those. And one of the things that we're doing is looking specifically at the thresholds that we're using to make our determination. For example, I can tell you, when we classify a child with developmental delay, what we're looking to find is that they have at least one area of development at the first percentile, or they have 2 or more areas of development at the 4th percentile. So that's our threshold. Other health impairment has been something that's been a little bit more difficult. If they have some significant executive functioning deficits, or if they have some significant behavior deficits on a rating scale, that's kind of what we used, and we look for observations to make sure that the observations in the classroom, that it's one way in one classroom, but that it's across settings. So one of the things that we're working on is actually checking and putting some thresholds in place for other health impairment. So we actually have a team that is looking specifically at other health impairment. But one example, like a lot of times what you guys see for discipline is you'll see a child who comes in with discipline issues, and you'll see that even if they have ADHD, you might see if they have problems with impulse control, self-regulation, shifting from one task to another, or shifting their behavior from one moment to another. But there's other characteristics of the ADHD, and so one of the things that we have to look at and say, is it that they're having these kinds of mood difficulties or oppositional defiant type issues, or is this really ADHD? Because we're also looking to see, do they have problems with planning and organization? Do they have problems with task initiation? There's other things that are involved in that ADHD as opposed to just controlling your impulses. And even if a child is classified with other health impairment, it doesn't mean that every single decision that they're making is a result of their ADHD. I have a son with ADHD. Sometimes he's just making a decision to make a poor decision, or he's just being, lack of better words, a jerk at that moment.
Right.
And then I know, he's 15. So then I know that those are the behaviors that I have to separate out from his ADHD. So I know that when the ADHD behaviors are present, I'm going to use that behavior and say, okay, this is a behavior that he needs help with, as opposed to these other decisions that he may make, that's just a poor decision that a teenager would make. And that's what we work, and that's what we're
Yeah, and so again, for each of these 13 disability categories, we have a criteria worksheet. And that's what we use at eligibility. So this is the specific learning disability criteria worksheet, but there is one for each one. We have one for other health impairment as well. And again, it has the 3 prongs that we look for each of them. There's a current medical documentation of another health impairment, so medical diagnosis. there's an adverse effect on educational performance, and they require specially designed instruction. So each of our criteria worksheets for each of the disabilities has this embedded in it, and they're from the state criteria worksheets under IDA and the federal.
And I think that would be the biggest issue to remember is just that diagnosis is not going to get them the IEP. And, but oftentimes other health impairment is where some of our students with ADHD end up because in Virginia, it is not recognized as a disability.
Right. It's just not. That's right.
Because they can't pinpoint.
It's not a case.
Right.
It's apparent.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Gotcha. What I would like to see is, because a lot of parents don't understand the language regarding like special needs, the process and things like that, I would like to see if the special education department can host maybe a parental workshop to educate the parents on the process, what they could do next.
There will be one in the spring.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
And to follow up with her, don't we have a special ed parent center?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, we do.
Yes, we do.
We do. And with the center, I just would like to see, a lot of parents don't know about it, so how can we help y'all communicate that out so the parents will know about it? Because when I tell the parents, they're like, I didn't know we have a resource center.
We opened it again, reopened the Parent Center this year.
Yeah.
And we had a wonderful turnout, actually, for the grand opening. But it was due to social media. Ms. Newsom had it everywhere. We had it on our websites. I mean, absolutely. And we are reorganizing our SEAC, which is the Special Education Advisory Council, and they are very interested in hosting something for parents. And that's primarily what they talk about. The new chairman for this is a former student with a disability from Portsmouth Public Schools who is now a minister, a reverend in the community, and he is really excited about getting exactly what you said, getting it simplified, letting these folks who are more familiar in the community explain it to parents rather than us. Because there's no way we would show this type of PowerPoint to parents. We want to talk to them so that they understand.
Right.
We just actually, Ms. Atkinson, we just got some feedback that I have not had a chance to look at closely, but there's a parent survey that is done every year by the Virginia Department of Education, and I just got the results from that this week. Some of those questions are, did your child's school explain things? Have you had an opportunity, are you given an opportunity to talk at meetings? That we scored poorly in, so we need to do some work with that. But those are the types of things, and we don't get a good turnout from parents responding, so I want our SEAC to encourage all the parents to respond to this survey, because it's all online.
That is great.
It's very easy to do.
Is SEAC the partnership that is all the schools in this area, or is that something?
No, that's Portsmouth.
Portsmouth.
So yes,
That's
SEAC is comprised of parents of students with disabilities, community members, agencies,
And school employees.
and a couple of school employees, but it's supposed to be a
And we just kind of sit back. We host them, we let them meet in our building, that kind of thing. So but they have talked several times about doing something for parents.
Ms. Williams, I'm sorry.
Well, thank you for coming and explaining this, because sometimes when the students come in for the disciplinary hearing and the parents they say they're ADHD, shouldn't they have an IEP or
they tell you they have an
504?
IEP.
Yeah, they say they haven't. But that's, so you could be diagnosed with that but not have an IEP or 504 or whatever.
Correct.
Oh, that's good to know.
Reverend Patillo?
I was asking, is it true that even with our schools that are not accredited, that it's a direct correlation sometimes to those schools having higher numbers of SPED?
No.
It's
Not higher numbers of SPED. Their SPED students might not be performing, which is why we're getting those specialists out to our lowest performing schools. But there's
performance gaps.
never been brought to my attention that the numbers are higher in those schools. In fact, in a couple of the schools, those numbers are some of our lowest.
Who is the
Because you have
chairman?
extra support in those schools.
Oh.
for working with those kids.
Okay.
Who is the chairman of the Special Ed Advisory Committee?
Cecil Palmer.
Reverend
Cecil Palmer.
Gotcha, thank you. And while we're talking about Special Ed Parent Advisory, how is our Title I Parent Advisory Center? Because we are supposed to have both of them,
Up
and they're doing
running.
well.
It has more parents right now than we do.
Than ever. Yeah.
Good. I'm glad that, I mean, we have these things on paper, but
Oh,
how,
it's actually
Get them up
functioning.
there.
we got to get them
It's functioning.
good. That's great.
Yeah.
Any other questions from board members? If not,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, ladies.
They're not doing any of this. They're not meeting here.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the, Mr. Ziegler, consideration of a special employee transaction report, March 8th.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion's been made and
Sorry.
second. Any discussion? That's fine. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, Madam Clerk, roll call vote.
Miss Allen?
Yes.
Miss Atkinson?
Yes.
Reverend Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Hines?
Yep.
Mr. Lamb?
Abstain.
And your reason?
Reason is
The
because
reason.
I know the person
Okay.
personally.
Thank you.
Reverend Patillo?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Parent?
Yes.
7 yes votes, 1 abstention, it passes.
Thank you. Next item is a consideration of a resolution to increase OPEB, other post-employment.
Move for approval.
Motion's
Second.
been made and second. Any discussion? Ms. Hines?
Can we have an explanation about the reason or the rationale to increase at this time in public, please?
We don't know.
I mean, I think we discussed it last time, but I think before we vote on it, to give it a,
Share our trustees.
to give one more statement.
We've been discussing this, I think, for the past year.
Yeah.
And we had talked about it with the board, and we said we would bring it up again at our
Trustees.
trustee meeting.
Right.
And we did, and the CFO prepared us the information of how it would work. We were looking at whether we should do a percentage or just a flat amount, and we came to the conclusion that the stipend increase, it was started in 2001 for $2,500 a year for those employees that retire at 55. And then when they become 65, they can get Medicare, so it ends. So since 2001, they have been getting the supplement of $2,500 a year, and we know that prescription costs, everything has gone up, so we were interested in increasing that to $500, so from $2,500 to $3,000, and since we had the funding in the OPEB account,
Right.
we wanted to use it because it can only be used for employee retirement benefits.
Okay. And it was,
Does that capture
Yep.
everything?
and it was a unanimous
And it was
decision by the
unanimous.
trustees.
By the trustees, and so this is the first increase they've had since 2001.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any more discussion? Hearing no discussion, Madam Clerk?
Miss Allen?
Yes.
Miss Atkinson?
Yes.
Reverend Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Hines?
Yes.
Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
Reverend Patillo?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Parent?
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Thank you. Next item is consideration of a revised budget for fiscal year 2018 of the general fund. What is the board's pleasure?
Move for approval.
Second.
All right, motion's been made and second. Any discussion?
Don't look at me.
No discussion? Madam Clerk? That would be good tonight.
Ms. Allen?
Yes.
Ms. Atkinson?
Yes.
Reverend Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Hines?
Yes.
Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
Reverend Patillo?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Parent?
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Thank you. Item 312, discussion, communication, annual report, and update. There's news on them. We're going to have a PowerPoint? I can get out
Chairman
again.
Parent, Vice Chair Williams, school board members, colleagues, and guests here tonight, I am delighted to bring you the annual communications report and update. Thank you. For the sake of time, I will be brief and try to move a little bit more swiftly through these slides, but if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. So, many of you are probably aware of the general responsibilities of my office. I help to manage our internal and external communications. I support schools with their in departments of their communications. I help to promote and market the school division. I serve as our FOIA compliance officer, and I also address media inquiries. I'd like to share with you some highlights from this past year. We started off 2017 with a communications audit performed by Hunter Communications. They briefed you this past summer at your retreat. We held focus groups with internal staff members and community members. We identified some things that we're really good at, such as our presence on social media, as well as some areas for improvement, such as how we connect and engage with parents and the community. We developed a 3-year communications plan. I won't go over it all tonight. It is attached in board docs. Feel free to review it and ask any questions if you have them. Additionally, in 2017, we revised the school division website. With the help of the IT department, we updated our site to comply with the American with Disabilities Act. So you may have noticed some changes in the color scheme and the text and the fonts and things like that, so that our website is more compatible with screen readers and people who need that type of support. We also launched a community page, and it includes some of the things that community members want to engage with us with, such as volunteering. So on that page, it has information about the PTA and how to sign up to be a volunteer and how to get involved with the Portland Schools Foundation. We also include more photos and videos on our website, so I hope you are checking that out. Those are always a big hit, especially on social media. We expanded our digital communications, so we offer text messaging. I know I heard Ms. Hines say that she's gotten the text messages before. That seems to be a big hit with parents. We use text messaging for just general announcements, weather announcements. We still use our automated calling system and our email system for more sensitive matters. We've also done more live social media videos. So during the snow, you probably saw Dr. Bracy out looking at road conditions. And then our very own student rep, Mr. Ian Robinson, was at Churchland High School in October for the anti-bullying initiative. He helped sign up many students help many students to sign the anti-bullying pledge, and he talked about how bullying is an issue across the nation, but importantly, we are taking a stand and making a difference. So thank you, Ian, for your cooperation. My office also provides communication supports for schools and departments. So we offer a website and social media training for a group of navigators. They're the people who help to share good news with me so that I can push it out to the general public. I also help schools with urgent communications. With the school board, you all get my emails about things that are going on, and with the community as well. Something I wanted to point out that was mentioned earlier, for example, with the special education department, I also help to make our communications to the community very plain and easy to read and understand. My colleagues might pinch me, but I am always talking about how we need to ease jargon, because for the average person, it can be difficult to understand some of these larger technical terms. So I pull on my old newspaper experience to try to make it plain and simple as possible so that everyday parents can understand what we're talking about and they can get the information and resources they need. I help to curate stories for our media channels. So, for example, I think Mr. Parent just talked about the Title I Parent Engagement Center. So, with the help of the PSAT teaching staff, we did a video over there. But thanks for the reminder. We will add that in the loop again so that more people can become aware of the great things they're doing over there. I also help pitch story ideas to the media, and I would like to share with you some highlights of our media coverage this year. We contract with a media monitoring service called Meltwater. And to make a long story short, they keep me up to date with all the times we're mentioned in print media, TV broadcasts, social media. I get alerts that way as well. So in 2017, we had 232 editorial mentions. This is the number of appearances in articles with a potential reach of 64.6 million viewers. That is a lot of people. So people are learning about Portsmouth Public Schools, the good and the bad. On the right-hand side, you'll see some of our key messages. Safety was a big one, and when we get further into the slides, you'll see a lot of that dealt with the bullying and the anti-bullying initiative that we had last year. Dr. Bracy gets mentioned a lot. There was a lot of talk about the budget, the PTA, and again, as I mentioned, the bullying. This slide will just show you when we had our highest exposure. It was in the month of October. If you look at the bottom right-hand chart, you'll see that long red bar. That reflects negative coverage. So to be quite frank, there was a story in October related to a student who had an issue on a bus, and we got a lot of negative coverage for that. So there are times when we do get dinged in the media for a variety of reasons, and so we always try to make sure that we're keeping on the up and up so that people are learning the good things that we do. If you look at the chart to the left-hand side, you'll see that most of our coverage comes from the Virginia pilot. And again, just to share with you some more about our top media coverage, the tone of it actually is positive as well. So I tried to give you an example of some of our most positive articles last year. Dr. Bracy being named as the Superintendent of the Year by Virginia PTA had great impact. But again, that second grader whose parents said she was dropped off at the wrong bus stop did get us a lot of negative media coverage. Again, we do really well on social media. I'd like to point out some of the trending themes last year. If you look on the left-hand side, the Norcom boys basketball team state championship win, the STEM day, and the funding and budget were some of the major themes. We also have some top posters in PPS. Mr. Ziegler leads the pack. He does a really great job of tweeting and retweeting. He does tweet a lot. You'll see Miss Annalie Cross, and then Church and High School does a great job. So when I'm talking to teachers and staff, I always share those accounts as great examples of how to interact on social media. It makes a difference. When you talk about the good things that are going on, it gives people a more balanced view of the school district. We have challenges, but we have so much to celebrate, and social media helps us to do that. Again, I'd like to point out just the anti-bullying campaign. I just wanted to include that picture of you all that had such a great impact on social media as well. And it just shows you in that month, while we did have some negative news on social media, we had very positive news. So again, when we have these hashtag campaigns, they are making an impact. People see them, they associate anti-bullying with Portsmouth Public Schools. You are making a difference. So keep using those hashtags. We definitely try to share some with our schools, and I'll continue to share them with you as well. That concludes the media portion of this. And I just wanted to share some details about the more technical parts of my job, because I know we've got some questions about that. So I also serve as our FOIA compliance officer, which the General Assembly states that every governmental agency has to have a person designated to handle FOIA requests. So last year, my office processed 97 requests, which is a lot, but it's important that we are transparent and we are sharing with the public the records that they request. We received about $1,300 in FOIA fees. These fees are not paid to me. They go to a miscellaneous revenue line in the budget, and they're only for the actual cost to search for those records, to supply those records, to access those records, to duplicate those records. So, we don't make money off FOIAs. They just cover actual costs. I also updated our website. I updated our FOIA policy, which the board approved in October, and we established a FOIA rights and responsibilities page. So a lot of times the public will have questions about FOIA, how do they submit a FOIA request, what happens if their FOIA request gets denied. This page helps to spell out what their process should be and what their options are. And also I completed our annual FOIA training through the state, and I also consult with Mr. Meekins and Ms. Jarvis on any FOIAs that require an extra set of eyes. Ongoing actions, I'm going to continue to train other staff members on FOIA. While I am the FOIA compliance officer, a member of the public could go to any person who works in Portsmouth Public Schools and submit a FOIA request. So while I can help us manage and maintain, and I'm the main point person, other frontline people need to know more about FOIA. Additionally, FERPA, which is the Federal Student Privacy Law, is often related to or intertwined with FOIA. Sometimes parents and community members might get them a little bit mixed up. So there are certain things that we cannot release under FERPA, whereas those student privacy laws may not be addressed through the state law. So I just wanted to give you a recap of that. And to wrap up, I'd like to share with you some things that I plan to work on this year. We are going to update our social media guidelines. Again, we have so many people on Twitter and Facebook, which is great, but we also want to make sure we're sharing consistently and a strong message across the board. We're going to provide some customer service training. How we answer the phone or open the door to people who walk in our buildings matters. That helps to give people a feeling tone of what goes on in Portsmouth Public Schools. I hope to accelerate progress in our school division app. I know I've gotten a couple of inquiries from schools to do that. We do have a contract out there that we're working through. It is a little bit more detailed and intricate, but we hope to work on that some more this year. I would like to relaunch the staff newsletter just because staff members are always looking for ways to stay connected and engaged. We want to expand the use of video and photography. We want to establish a community email list. You know, the city does this. They send out news and information and good news blurbs, and I think we do a great job of posting to our website, but sometimes if you're not coming to our website, you're not seeing it. Right. So that list will help with that. I want to launch a good news portal, which that's in the works already, where people can tell us about good things that are going on that we may not see. And we're going to revise our division brochure. We're going to develop a model and branding campaign. I know the board talked about that this past summer. So we're working with some of the dollars in the budget to launch that effort. And we want to increase civic engagement. Last year, Dr. Bracey and some senior staff members went to civic leagues to talk about the school division, went to some of the social and community organizations, and that's really important to telling the Portsmouth story. And we're also going to continue media engagement. Again, you saw with some of the coverage that we're getting, just to make sure that it's balanced and it's fair. The news is what it is, but we want to make sure that we're always lending our voice to what's going on. That concludes my presentation.
Go right ahead.
Left to right. Thank you, Sharice. First off, this is great. I can say as a board member, we communicate better than any other division via social media, via phone calls. I hear this all the time. And I know that's because of you and your team, so I'm proud to go around to other cities and hear that our website is up to date, our social media page, we tweet more, we Facebook more, we're just very transparent. Now to get to my question is where are we as far as the logo change? Because I know we talked about it at the summer retreat, and we said that we wanted to get some of our art students to be involved in that, so where are we with that?
Right, so on the communications plan, it's technically listed as a year 2 goal. Gotcha. So this year we helped to identify some funding, so we'll be able to launch that in year 2. We're in year 1 technically. So we'll have to work with graphic designers, and that will likely involve putting out a bid to get some help with that.
Okay. To follow up on that, why can't we just use our art students who are graphic designers, and that would be a cost to that?
We can definitely consider that. For branding campaigns, we also want to get some professional input as well. And I would suggest that because we have not had a rebranding campaign in recent history. So I think there are definitely ways to include students in that effort. I think at the retreat you had mentioned maybe having them vote on it, right, or having them to offer suggestions.
Right.
I do think
to a professional, like have them do the. Oh, I cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I think we're along the same line. To have them participate in the process.
Right.
When we roll out a branding campaign, it is a big change. Because everything with our logo on it has to change.
Right.
The website, stationery, our email tags,
everything.
Many things. And so we want to make sure that we're consistent across the board and that final image reflects what we're trying to project about Portsmouth Public Schools. So I think there are many opportunities to engage our art students and teachers on that, probably on the front end. I think it would be extremely helpful as we wrap up that process to get a professional's eye to offer any feedback and recommendations.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Okay.
Son?
Thank you. Sharice, as always, thank you. You're always in contact, and I can always, let me search my email real quick and see what Sharice said. There is a big gaping hole, in my opinion, on our Portsmouth Public School webpage. There's no link for our school calendar on there.
Okay.
When I go, because when we were doing the whole school calendar change because of the snow days, to go and find our school calendar, I had to Google search it. There's not a link on our webpage, on our front landing page.
Okay, you want the front page. It's under the parent tab.
I couldn't find it today.
But I think it gets lost under the shuffle because I'm looking under schools. I'm looking under. I'm not necessarily looking for a parent.
Couldn't find it.
So what I would like to see is an individual tab for calendars.
Yeah.
Because if I'm on this,
I hear
it's 15 clicks to find it.
Yeah.
And I don't like 15 clicks, and I don't think anybody else likes 15 clicks on a 4-inch screen. You understand what I'm saying? And so to me, that was a big deal. So I ended up just doing Google search, PPS, Virginia, calendar, boom, and it was right there. To me, as a service, too, it should be immediately available without having to click and click and click and then get.
Fair enough. Let me ask
So
a
that's
question.
me.
You know the upcoming event section on the upper right-hand side of the page? If it was there, like a link there, do you think that would help?
I think it needs its own link on the splash page. I should be able to go to Portsmouth Public Schools. Oh, here's calendars. Boom, there I go.
Gotcha.
That's just my humble one board member, one parent, one somebody who's trying to help grandparents keep up with the scheme of things as well. So,
And that happened to me. Somebody asked me this afternoon, and I said, hold on just a minute. And I went, and I couldn't find it. And so I kept looking, and so I just went in under search and typed in calendar, and it popped up under Google. So it would be nice to have it in a place where parents could easily click, and there it is.
two more things. I'm sorry. School websites are all over the place.
They are.
School websites are, I don't want to say a hot mess, but they're all over the place. There's no consistency. And we've talked in this room, whether it's open or closed session, about students that go from school to school to school to school. There's got to be some consistency, especially for the parents, to keep up with things. And so as we go through this new branding campaign, and even if it's before, but when we set up new websites again, I don't know if there's a way that we can do a template for a web page for a school so that each school looks the same.
I thought there was one.
There is. 100% agree with what you're saying.
Okay.
It is a mammoth task.
And I understand that, because 9 times out of 10, the people that man the web pages at the schools are teachers, and they're volunteering. And so I think we need to really think about what we want to put on the school web page. But I know, especially for the high schools to go and get their athletic calendar, some schools are very easy to do. Some schools it's 10 clicks. And if you want people to come to your school event and pay money to go into your student athletic fund, it should be very easily grabbed. The third thing, and I'm sorry, I'm going to be quick on this, is there a way that we can put a schedule up on PSET on the web page? Because I know there's a routine to PSET. Now, for me to sit here and tell you what that routine and what that schedule is, I'm not exactly sure.
PSET has a web page.
Okay.
But would you like it in a more prominent position, like the schedule? Is that where you're?
I think so, because people kind of think of it as haphazard. You know, that there are things on, and I never know what's going to be on when I flip, and I don't know how to find stuff. There's people that look for the school board meeting to be on PSET, and I send them to YouTube because I know it's there. So if there was a way that they could see what was upcoming, you know, so like if we do like a school highlight, you know, at 7:15 in the morning, you know, school highlight, concert series at 12, blah blah blah. Just something that's more generic, because I think people think it's kind of haphazard, you know, and so they just keep flipping through rather than going to it for information.
And we do have a schedule. We just need to raise its profile.
Okay. But otherwise, thank you very much. But I
appreciate your feedback. This is great. Give me more.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just a real quick question. I noticed on the presentation that it seemed as though on social media, there was more positive
Yes.
than versus the Virginia pilot, where there seemed to have been more. Yeah, I mean, there was an opposite. So it's almost as though you have a social media versus traditional media aspect. So my question is, I'm just real curious with Twitter and what everyone else gets on with this. Do we have like demographics with regards to who is following or seeing the social media aspect versus the traditional media aspect? Or is there even a way that we can gauge that?
This is anonymous.
Yes and no. There are metrics. They're not based on demographics in terms of
Well, just any information. I mean, like age group or...
So, like our media monitoring service, Google Analytics, can help us with learning more about our page views, and I do monitor that. So I have data on that. Even age range, we have some information on that. Beyond that, it gets a little bit more difficult, and I can do some research to try to find out. But I agree with you. I know when I worked for the newspaper, that was information that we kind of called in was kind of like an internal thing. It's not always shared publicly, but I will try to learn more about our audience. That's essentially what you're talking about in terms of who's watching us and on what platform they're connecting with us.
So,
I consider you an asset. I value what you do here. With TV and media production being one of our CTE programs, is there any thought of maybe having a podcast run by students that would tie in? Podcasts are very popular. It's another opportunity for our story to get out, but from a student perspective, even if a short talk show, but the podcast seems to be the thing that the young people like. But how is there a way for us to incorporate that CTE program and maybe spicing up maybe the PSET channel, and then maybe introducing a podcast and engaging some more of our students in that process?
Great idea. Love the idea of a concept. We're still looking for a student who would like to lead that effort. The CTE class does use the studio, the PSET studio. That track is a little bit different than what PSET does, but there is some collaboration. So part of the challenge is the schedule as well. By the time the CTE students, the TV production students kind of learn how to use the equipment, there's a semester change and they start all over again. That's what we discovered this year. So the teacher does coordinate and collaborate with our two PSET staff members. But the learning curve is so steep and the rate of learning is that by the time they learn it, they're changing. So we need to kind of maybe look at some different opportunities to collaborate there.
Opportunity for maybe an end-of-year project or something.
Right, exactly. It may not be an ongoing thing necessarily done by the TV production class beyond them sharing and using equipment and things like that. But I hear your idea, and I like the idea of getting students involved in the podcast, on social media, and things like that.
That will also increase their resume as they're taking this class. They have something to show for it. And then we have something to show the public that there is a light at the end of the tunnel of these CTE classes, which we're going to continue to add on to.
And I'll talk to Mr. Mundy a little bit more about that class and how we can collaborate. Excellent idea.
you think about all the things that we've talked about with media and communication, and to have one person to coordinate it all. I mean, plus you did take time out to have your little one. We have to forget, we can't forget that. And you've done you're a great asset, and we're glad we stowed you from Virginia Pilot.
I have to also thank the Department of Human Resources, and I forgot to introduce a very special person, Mrs. Crystal Bax. If you wouldn't mind maybe saying that. She is this semester. I believe that was again an idea or suggestion from the retreat this past summer. So the Department of Human Resources helped to identify an intern, and she's done a great job. Crystal's been helping to post things on the website as well, and we'll be doing some video and social media. So Yes, it is a lot for one person.
Yeah.
But I am thankful for the support of Crystal and my colleagues.
You know, Crystal might want to interview Ian. That's just to get, because he's got a lot, I mean.
I'm trying to go easy on Ian.
He gets out of school at 10:30 now. He's got plenty of time.
It's time to put him on camera. Yeah. Some of the nice things that he's interacting with students. It'd be a great interview that you could ask him questions about some of the questions the students have asked him. So that's just a thought. But you're doing a great job, and thank you so much. All right. Thank you. All right, the next item is, Dr. Bracy. And that is where the budget.
It's the budget.
Budget.
Ms. Hines, the one B.
I said budget.
Okay.
You were saying Dr. Bracy.
You said Bracy.
You said Bracy.
In other words, I said 313, which is budget.
You said Bracy.
You said,
probably
Dr. Bracy. But it is Dr. Bracy's
What I was
budget.
saying is budget, and it's going to be Dr. Bracy.
Oh, we didn't let you finish.
You
We're
didn't let
sorry.
Would you please?
All right.
Well,
Budget.
I wanted to.
Dr. Bracy.
Yes.
All right, now.
Because there was no way to. I'm going to catch Clue up real quick. I asked to amend the agenda because there was no budget discussion
We
on here.
amended, before you got here, we amended the
Because,
agenda.
we have to vote on it next week. So part of me wanted to open it up to make sure that nobody had any questions. At this point, Dr. Bracy, have you made any adjustments to the budget that we need to know about? Or are we seeing the same budget that's coming forward that you presented already, based on any discussions that you've had with
Right.
other leadership?
Everything is still included as is. We're still waiting for a final budget because some of the projections where the governor has and the Senate, it's so variation in there. So once we have an approved budget, we may have to come back and share some changes, but we just have to wait and see.
Because the State Department hasn't finalized theirs.
No.
Okay. I just want to, what I'm about ready to say does not impact my budget vote at all. But there is one position in there as far as the social studies position is concerned for that interventionist. Only because there's so much discussion of, are we doing social studies across the board? Are we not doing social studies across the board at the State Department level? There's a bill right now that's tabled that's going to take away PBAs for social studies. There's a bill right now that's taking away social studies testing, or some of it at the high school starting next year. And I understand, believe me, I understand teaching, and I understand new standards, and I understand crosswalks and new assessments. But at this time, I don't necessarily, I would question putting that money in the budget for that position if we could turn around and put it for something that it would be a higher priority. And so my higher priority would be towards security, towards teacher raise, and towards teacher, kindergarten teacher assistants. And so, like I said, it's not enough to change my vote on it, but I did want to just express not angst, but just some curiosity and just some, I don't know if it's not want versus need at this moment, I think is the basic that I go back to.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
Okay. Reverend Patillo.
Just had a question about that statement. Are they still changing the curriculum for social studies for
Yes.
next year?
Yes, but the question that I understand is how much are we going to test of the new standards? Crosswalk
Another
versus
question.
all that, yes.
So the bill that's tabled, are they planning on taking up that bill for next year, or?
It's tabled so it can come back up. It hasn't been killed.
I just want to make sure we're not behind the curve. If by chance we are still testing next year, and the curriculum is still changing next year, that we're not behind. Because they only have, I think, 2 people now. Other
3 if you can include the
the instructional areas have a plethora of. So I just want to make sure we're not behind the curve on the curriculum change, just in case they decide to continue the testing. It's my opinion on that, but
Okay. All right. Any further discussion regarding the budget? All right, the next item is...
Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. The next item is 314, discussion, agenda review, March 22nd. Dr. Bracy.
Okay. The March meeting will be held at Parkview Elementary School.
Yay.
Remember, we're going out to the ground.
So in our early session, we will have a discussion on the first and second quarter of the MWBE report, followed by our closed session. Mrs. Williams will be reading the mission statement. She's the board member of the month that will be handling all of that. We will look at the agenda, then we'll have Ian share his report. Recognitions will be Woodrow Wilson High State Champion and IC Norcom High State Champions, and these are track and field from the indoor track and field competition that was recently held. We will also have our curriculum and instruction report by Dr. Wynn. Resolutions that will be on the agenda will be that for recognizing Public School Volunteer Appreciation Week and also recognizing School Library and Media Center Appreciation Month. Followed by our approval of the minutes, public comment, Human Resources and Operations monthly report, roll call vote for employee grievance, roll call vote for employee transaction report. On item 10, budget and planning, we have a placeholder right now for potential contract. 10.2, we'll have the roll call vote for our financial budget for February. Item 11, superintendent's report. Then we will have the consideration for the school board for the proposed operating budget for fiscal year 2018-19. Followed by board members' comments and concerns, and then adjournment.
Okay.
Second. Oh.
No, you don't have.
We're discussing it. All right, thank you very much. At this time, we will have discussion, board members' report. Do we have any board members' report?
Policy Committee will be meeting next week.
Policy Committee. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Technology operations, we're having our first quarterly meeting after spring break.
Good. All right.
And when is the Tidewater Regional meeting? When is
Oh,
that?
I'm sorry, that's March 19th, the week after.
March 19th.
Yeah, March 19th at Woodrow Wilson High School.
And Teacher of the Year is next week? Wednesday? 21st.
Yes.
Okay.
Busy week.
We got a busy March.
Yes.
We do. I would like to, if there are no other board reports, I would like to make this statement. Each year the mayor and the city manager reach out to us for an update on how our budget is shaping up. This year was no different. The mayor contacted Dr. Bracy and me to revisit the idea of establishing a joint OPEB trust for retiree benefits, and in the spirit of open communication and maintaining a good working relationship with the city, Dr. Bracy and I met with the mayor and Dr. Patton to hear his proposal. Last year, the board was briefed on the legal challenges of a previous proposal, and it was unanimously voted against moving forward. But since the mayor reached out again, I want to relay his updated proposal to you. I will ask that you keep your comments. If you have any comments, you can comment at the end when I finish. Mayor Rowe's proposal is as follows. Portsmouth Public Schools has $12 million in its OPEB trust for retiree benefits. The city has $3 million set aside for retiree benefits and does not have an OPEB trust. The mayor is proposing the city would join our OPEB trust to establish one joint trust, but with two separate components, one for Portsmouth Public Schools and one for the city. The city's $3 million would not be put in the trust. Instead, the city would take $4.5 million of the $12 million for their component of the trust, so that Portsmouth Public Schools trust cash would be split as follows. PPS would have 7.5 million, and the city would have 4.5 million. And the 3 million would be used to pay for the initial architect and engineering costs for a new middle school. Under this proposal, we would need to make sure there is enough money in the trust to pay for current and future retiree costs. This is referred to as the annual required contribution, or known as ARC, and it is determined by a third party called an actuary. Portsmouth Public Schools would request its ARC each year from the city. Now, there were some questions that Dr. Bracey and I asked, and our immediate questions were, can this be legally done? Number two, what is the financial impact to Portsmouth Public Schools and its retirees? And three, what happens if the city does not provide funding for future annual required contributions for the PPS portion of the trust? We already have been briefed on this matter from our attorney. So at this point, I just want to provide information on the projected financial impact that this would have on the school system. PPS OPEB trust goes from 75% funded to a projected 47% funding. The uncovered portion of PBS future liability increases from 3.9 million to a projected 8.5 million. The ARC would need to be funded sooner as a result of losing 4.5 million of the pre-funded cash. For an example, the average ARC for the last 3 years was around $500,000. Using a $500,000 ARC as an example, the current pre-funding cash would be used up in 8 years, or in 2027 would be the first year Portsmouth Public Schools would need to start funding the ARC again. Without this pre-fund, Portsmouth Public Schools would need to fund the ARC now. Under the mayor's proposal, $3 million provided by the city for a fourth middle school is set aside to help with the initial cost. Additional funding would likely need to be financed through the city debt issuance. In summary, the mayor's proposal would dip into Portsmouth Public Schools retiree benefits to help pay initial cost for a new school. Again, I'm only relaying to you what was shared with me. Dr. Bracey and I have listened to the mayor and the city manager in the spirit of open communication, and I just wanted to make sure that you knew and had this feedback for your information. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any subcommittee reports? I do have, I would like to say that there is an item that has just come to Dr. Bracey and my attention that is going to require the board to go into executive closed meeting under consideration. And Ms. Williams, if you will, it's a personnel issue, if she will read that, and we'll go into closed meeting.
Can I ask a question?
You
Are
can.
we going to adjourn when we come out
Yes,
of close
ma'am.
so those interested parties can
Yes.
go home for the night?
Yes.
Okay.
The answer is yes.
All right. Consideration of personnel matters, including the assignment, performance, and resignation of specific school employees as permitted under subsection A.1.
Second.
Motion been made. Second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Allen?
Yes.
Ms. Atkinson?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Hines?
Yes.
Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
Reverend Patillo?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Parent?
Yes.
It's unanimous.
All right. This board is in closed session.
Good night, all.
Heard, discussed, or considered during the preceding closed meeting.
Second.
Motion second.
Yes.
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 Move for adjournment.
Yes.
Yes.
Move for adjournment. Thank you.